Merry Christmas and happy holidays to you from the ugliest building in the Gulch. It's not in the Gulch anymore, virtually. I'm Jeremy Gover, Nashville correspondent with AP Radio.
And I am Braden Gall, and this is a gold standard mashup at Christmas extravaganza. And it's cool to be with you guys. Who else is on the pod?
I'm Emma Lingan of both of the aforementioned podcasts, and I am the Nashville Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
And of course, this week we are brought to you by Sinkers, Beverages, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I've got the Shotgun Willie's Barbecue hat on right now if you are watching us, so rate, review, subscribe to It's All Your Fault, as well as the Gold Standard podcast. Awesome to see both of you guys this Christmas holiday. Hope everybody has a great holiday out there, right? Happy Hanukkah, the Festivus for the rest of us, the airing of grievances, the feats of strength, happy Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate. I hope you have a great one because the Predators are streaking, boys and girls. The Predators are streaking. That is right. 7 out of 8 possible points in the homestand, 3-0-1. And people, they scored 5 goals. They scored 5 goals in a game, and they're winning, and they have a winning record now at home. How did this happen? How did this happen, Jeremy and Emma? How did we get here?
I think it's and Emma can shed some light on this. I hope she does, actually, because my knee-jerk reaction is that they have figured it out. The necessary time has allotted them to figure it all out, all the newcomers and the key pieces there. And now we're seeing them. I think it's Emma's 5 or 6 games in a row. We've seen them play really well despite of the results. And it's the transition game is stronger. They're faster. They're not thinking about where they're going to play the puck. They're not, all this reactionary stuff that looked so good late in the year last year is finally here. And we're seeing that on a consistent basis. Again, regardless of the results. Okay, I want to make sure it's very clear. I'm not just saying that. That's not my opinion because they've racked up wins. I just mean they've lost in overtime, whatever. They have looked good doing it. And that's what we've been waiting for pretty much since, I think realistically, probably November 1st, right? We all knew there was going to be some growing pains. And, Stamkos and Marchessault and Shea, those aren't fringe players on the fourth line. They're key pieces to your lineup. And therefore, they're going to be on the ice a lot in important situations and relied on to do certain things. And so there was going to be kind of an ironing out period there. But we all thought it would be around November. And here we are, December, Christmas Eve, Christmas week. And now they seem to have finally got it.
Yeah, I agree. It's consistency is key. I mean, you're like you said, even regardless of the results, if you're just going on the eye test, this looks like a different team than they were a month ago. And they look like they're playing more cohesively. They are actually, they're connecting. They're not overthinking things. You're seeing consistent personnel combinations out there, which I think is really key and important. I think some of the big moves have been obviously like looking at Stamkos being 1C. I think it's a little bit like, why did we not try this earlier? Because this it seems to be, a pretty key part of all of this, but Stamkos moving to center. Then you've got Marchessault's on a heater right now. And like you said, Jeremy, you got to get those guys going, because once you get those guys going, and you've even got Filip Forsberg very quietly leading the team in points right now because he has all these assists. Everyone's saying, oh, he's, it's quiet. He's been quiet. He's kind of off. It's like, well, he's not scoring goals, but he's still very visible out there. And so I think it's a combination of those things, but it hasn't been perfect. Obviously, the last few games we've seen, even against Carolina on Monday, early in the third period, Nashville had a 4-0 lead. And then they allowed Carolina to score 2 very quick goals in less than a minute apart. So you're seeing a little bit, it's not perfect. It's not a complete turnaround. You want to be able to be in those situations where you feel confident that that's not going to happen. But I think ultimately you're seeing, even when they do get into those situations, it's a team that wants to win and they're playing like they want to win and they know how to win, which sounds overly simplified, but we were really not seeing that from this team early on.
Do you guys do you take it all the way back to coming back from Canada? Like they get embarrassed by Montreal, they get embarrassed by Ottawa. That was the weekend that I thought something, if anything was going to happen, that there might be something happening around that time from a change standpoint. They don't, and they play much better against Calgary that Tuesday night. And it's sort of been since that moment. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Marchessault has, I think, 11 points or 12 points since Brunette made the comments about, when Adam asked him about sort of the scratching and the strategy around scratching, and he's had those points since then. Do you guys think it goes back to the Calgary game? I know Brunette said he had made some changes schematically a few games prior to that, and it hadn't really showed up yet. It felt like it started again, backs against the wall cliche against Calgary.
I actually think it started. Well, you make a very strong case for that, Braden, that it could have started there for sure. But we all know that players and coaches coaches and GMs, and they talk through the media to the players, right? They reinforce messages, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna put it back to Barry Trotz on 102.5 The Game. He goes on 102.5 The Game's weekly hit, and he talks about how changing the coach is not an option. That obviously he admits that there's an inevitability if they lose like 14 games in a row or something like that, then he's got to do what he has to do. But he's basically reinforcing, no, the coach is the option. We're going to start playing younger players if the veteran players can't get it together. All these things. We're going to look to the future. All these things. I guess what I'm saying is, I looked at that as a rock bottom part of the season where you're right. They went and they got embarrassed in Montreal. They did not play well in Canada. All those things. They lost to two teams they absolutely 100% should beat, even on talent alone, and they didn't. And then Trotz then follows that up with not only not firing Brunette, which Braden, you and I talked to the Titans game that day, but how, okay, it's got to be coming, right? And so, and it didn't come. And then Trotz goes on the air and solidifies his coach and says, all right, we're going to do this instead, and this thing's going to turn around. This is going to happen. I think that message was like, well, we have no choice. And I think that maybe just subconsciously propelled the Predators into the streak we're seeing now.
I am going to throw maybe a hot take into this discussion because I think that
too early in the morning for that.
Yeah, see, I'm on East Coast time right
That's
now,
true.
so I've been up for longer.
She's on hot take o'clock. We're still back at coffee o'clock.
Yeah. Wake up, guys. Catch up. No, I think all of that. Realistically, what I think is that it's not one thing. It wasn't one event or one thing that launched this whole thing. Like, again, even realistically speaking about for example, we all kind of talk about how that the 9-2 loss to Dallas last year is kind of what was the launch pad for that whole 18 game point streak. And it's like, yes, those two things coincided and that definitely played a part in it, but it really wasn't as simple as like X equals Y or this caused this. And so I think that we're seeing something kind of similar here where I would say that one thing that should not be overlooked in this whole, maybe bounce back, maybe come back, if that's what this is the injuries to Ryan O'Reilly and Roman Josi. I think that those, for a couple of reasons. Number one, with Josi, he had been leading, the scoring charge. I mean, this team could not score goals to save their lives. And Roman Josi is that kind of player who can put a team on his back and drag them into the fight and say, all right, I'm going, you're coming with me. And in a way, even subconsciously, it seemed like the rest of the team was kind of falling back on that. And they were kind of leaning on him because they know it's like, oh, he's here. Like dad will catch us if we fall. And that kind of seems like what they were doing there. And then again, even subconsciously, I think it's just human nature to be that way. And then the injury to Ryan O'Reilly, that is what forced them to elevate Steven Stamkos into the 1C role. And that was supposed to be just kind of temporary, and even that, Michael Gallagher has always said, like, Predators don't need a 2C. They have a 2C. his name is Ryan O'Reilly. They have a great 2C, but he's been playing 1C because they don't have anyone else. And so that kind of forced them to move Stamkos up to that top line. And then it was the Calgary game where right last minute before the game, Gus Nyquist got sick.
Yep.
And so that's when they had to move Marchessault up to that top line. So again, like all of this was kind of slapdash, last minute, was only supposed to be temporary, but it ended up kind of being a winning recipe here because, that Calgary game, even though it ended up being a loss, it was one of those like, oh, this team actually, if they keep playing like this, they are going to win more games than they lose. And we've now started to see that. They're 3-0-1 in their 4-game homestand heading into the holiday break here. So I think that, again, realistically, it's a combination of all of the things that we have just said, where it's, Barry Trotz sending a message, Andrew Brunette making those schematic changes, consistency in the personnel, but also these kind of uncontrollable things that happen that force different players into these certain roles, and it ends up working out for the best.
So it was a perfect winter storm of a Christmas miracle, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yes.
Slapdash, by the way, not used enough in pod.
It's a great word.
I know. I totally agree.
I agree.
I completely agree. This will have a point. Just bear with me on this. So I'm looking at the lower broad hockey fantasy standings. We've got the Tennessee Tryhards over there in 10th place, and we got Hockey Fights Everyone in 13th place. I'm in fourth
but
place,
not last place.
I'm in fourth place, but who's counting? In the lower broad hockey.com, check it out. Hot Fantasy League. But here's the reason I bring that up is I wanted to check because I've been posting all of the fantasy rankings for all of the Predators for most of the season, and much like the first 25 years of their existence, they got Roman Josi and UC Saros in the top 100, maybe like Forsberg as well, but they've all been trending in a very bad direction. And so I wanted to pull up the entire team over the last 14 days, which I believe covers through Calgary. And Filip Forsberg right now is the 16th rated player in the NHL from a fantasy. Fantasy is just what it is. So, I'm not saying this is anything, super definitive here, but no goals is one thing, but 12 assists plus 5, I think is a big one there. 1 power play point, 22 shots on goal. Jonathan Marchessault, 7 goals, 4 assists. He's number 24 in the fantasy ranks. Stamkos is number 60. He's been outside of the top 200 the entire season. But again, Marchessault plus 7, Stamkos 3 goals, 4 assists, and his goal on Monday night against Carolina was sort of just like, I'm going to get the puck into the net kind of goal. I'm just going to do this until it gets, damn it, get in there. But plus 6 for Stamkos after riding at like a minus 14, 15, 16 for most of the season. And he's a top 60 player in fantasy. So, I kid about the fantasy rankings, but it's a nice indicator of how well they're playing offensively. And most importantly, those 3 guys, that's plus 18. That's a total turnaround. And I'm not suggesting this indicates anything. They're about to go on the road for 5 games and they've been atrocious on the road. But that plus 18 for those 3 guys is a pretty huge turnaround from where this team was for most of the season.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they had a rough go there where you're thinking like these are not the kind of numbers that these players put up on a bad year. Like that's where they were at, and you started to wonder like, have they regretted signing here? Have they regretted coming to Nashville? Is there something in Nashville, not the city, but in the organization that is causing this? That they're like, Shea, I think we kind of gave him a mulligan, right? Okay, well, he played in this certain system in Carolina forever, and he obviously one of the best defensemen to do it. He comes to a completely different system. Now he's got to learn a different. Like we kind of gave him like, okay, but Stamkos and Marchessault was like, hey, propel offensive plays, gain the offensive zone, set up shop on the power play even, and just go to work. And it seemed to be lost on them almost. And so you started to have these other thoughts creep in. So, yes, I agree. It's so great to see them, even in fantasy numbers that mean nothing, except for to all of us individually, right? It's so great to see them have some success there because it is an indicator of some kind to the success they are now having in real life.
Yeah, I think, too, like, to your point about Stamkos and Marchessault, there's been a lot of chatter, which is, expected to happen when any team is doing poorly or any players individually are doing poorly that, oh, there's no chemistry and they regret coming here and they don't like the system and all this stuff. And it's like, where are you getting that from? Like, especially Stamkos has played in one organization for his entire career. It's going to take time. Now, I will admit that it took more time than I was expecting it to, but the concept is still there that they just needed some time to adjust. And there was all this, chatter about like, oh, this organization isn't a fit for him or the system isn't a fit for him. And it's like, okay, it just feels like a lot of grasping at straws to figure this out. But it was pretty evident, I mean, early on, particularly on the power play. I mean, Stamkos is one of the most prolific power play scorers to ever do it. And it became very evident early on that the entire game plan on the power play was get the puck to Stamkos. And that is a very easy game plan to decipher if you're a penalty kill of an opposing team. And so it was pretty, it was pretty rough to watch. It was hard to watch because it was like, okay, clearly this isn't working. It's like they kind of the same idea as what I was talking about earlier with Roman Josi. It's like you subconsciously they start to rely on like, okay, these are the stars, these are the guys that are going to carry us into, just get it to them and let them do their thing. But in order for that to work, they have to play together as a 5-man unit, whether it's 5-on-5 or on the power play. And we just weren't seeing that. It was too top heavy. It looked too, because that's how this team has been the last several years. It's been a very top heavy team. I mean, even as recently as last year, that top line of Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Nyquist were doing everything. It was those three guys and Josi. And then there was a really significant drop off in terms of the stat leaders on the team for points and goals and things like that, because there wasn't depth on this team. And now they have depth in theory, but they didn't quite know how to use it. And they were still playing as if they only had three guys who could do everything. And that's not the case anymore. So it's like you're kind of starting to see them figure it out a little bit more. And you're starting to see, like, again, guys contributing more, throughout the lineup, even if they're not necessarily showing up on the score sheet. They're realizing, oh, we all have a role to play here. And we all, like, this only works if we are all working together.
And just real quick on Emma's point about how Stamkos is one of the prolific power play scorers of all time. He is 11th all time on the NHL's all-time power play goals list. He's got 220. He's 11th all time. So, yeah, I mean, you think just by adding him, let alone Marchessault, that overnight they would fix their power play. So, again, it's just great to see him being successful in other areas because that's only going to lift the power play as well. How many times, guys, have we sat on these shows and for the past, 5 years, 6 years, maybe even 7 years and said, well, the power play cost them a playoff series. They didn't score a single goal against Dallas in that playoff round, and that would have won them the series probably. Like there's all, or hey, if they had a top 15 power play unit, they would have placed, what. So it's just as the power play goes, they go. And again, you would think that when Stamkos was signed, that was okay. This is going to fix the power play, and it's just again, what is the saying? I'm losing it. It's a rising tide rises all ships, or whatever.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So the power play does that. And
my coffee just kicked in. Gover.
Yeah. Are we now on hot take o'clock?
Yeah, there we go.
Slapdash.
Well, so like, here's the thing. I got a lot to. There's a lot there to say. First of all, I agree that it was going to take time. We all kind of agree with that. And the problem is it took so much time that they're probably not going to make the playoffs. And so that's a major, like, we can't just sort of like yada, 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 with the airing of grievances and the feats of strength. We can't yada, yada, yada over not making the playoffs. But
they're only 11 points out, Braden, as of right now. Are you still going to give up?
The rate with which they have to win, like 3-0-1 is kind of what they have to do almost like the rest of the year. They've got to go 3-1 basically every 4 games. And this is a team that is still like 3 wins on the 3-10-4 on the road, and they're about to go on the road against 5 really good teams mostly. I don't know. I'm not giving up on anything, but I think statistically it's going to be very improbable for them to make the playoffs.
Fair enough.
Stamkos and Marchessault. I want to talk about the depth thing for just a second, because Stamkos and Marchessault. Stamkos, this is a more than a point per game player for each of the last like 3 full seasons. 4 seasons or so that he's played, and he's on pace for like 22 goals, and on an 82 game pace. Marchessault's a little bit more around his career. He's not quite been the same prolific player that Stamkos has. And I mean, even he's on pace for, about 55, 60 points, which is solid, but, not a 40 goal Conn Smythe Award winner. And Stamkos is way below that number even. So I still think there's a lot of work to do for all these guys, especially considering most of those 24 points from Marchessault have come in the last like 6 games. The power play also scored the first power play unit also was a part of the problem. Like they hadn't scored a goal since November. It is Christmas. I just want to point that out. And here's my question about the depth, Emma, that you were talking about, because I find this to be really interesting, because Colton Sissons gets his first assist of the season on Monday night. Tommy Novak gets his 4th assist on the season. He has 9 points. Part of what made last year the greatest scoring team in franchise history was that they had Colton Sissons setting a career high in points and tying a career high in goals. Novak on 45 points in terms of his production. Gus Nyquist setting a career high. Like right now, I agree with you from a talent and a roster perspective. They have more depth, but none of the pieces have delivered any of that. And so they had more depth scoring last year than this year. And Novak has some time to turn it around. Evangelista's got, I think, 14 points on the season. But again, that's on pace for 40. That's not a lot of points. And so what made last year special was across the board career sort of seasons for a lot of guys. And that has been totally missing this year. I know Jankowski had a beautiful goal on Monday night, but like you can't that's not you're not going to get 35 points out of Jankowski, but you need more than 3 from Colton Sissons. Like that's not a Colton Sissons problem. That's a system and a team and a unity and a cohesion and a chemistry problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
but-
I think that's part of it, though. Like you said, on paper, yes, this team is deeper, but what they still are in the process of figuring out, I believe, is that they can't just rely. They're still acting like a top-heavy team, and they're not. And so that's kind of part of it, I think, is that it's not just, oh, this is great, Stamkos and Marchessault have figured it out and they're scoring and that's great. It's the rest of the team needs to start realizing that, like, oh, in order for them to do that, we need to also play our game and not just make the entire game plan about getting the puck to those guys. And so I think that again, I agree. I really don't have an answer about Colton Sissons as far as what the deal is there. I will give him the benefit of the doubt, though, and say that he probably more than anyone on this team has been shuffled throughout the lineup, really
Yep.
more than anyone. And that's kind of, it's one of those things where, what's the saying where it's like, don't let anyone know that you're good at something, or like you'll have to do it all the time. And I feel like that's Sissons. He's the guy. He's the Swiss Army knife. You can put him on the top line, you put him on the 4th line. Like, he's probably not best deployed on the top line, but if you need him to play there, he can, and he will be fine. But you can also put him on the 4th line and do all of these things, which is great, and that's a great piece to have. But I think that it's almost to his detriment now, because he doesn't really have a defined role on this team. And now hopefully you're seeing, like I said, a little bit more consistency. But again, now they've lost Cole Smith for 4 to 6 weeks, which is going to be really, really detrimental to them. That he's one of their strongest, best forecheckers, really good penalty killer. That's going to be, I think that's going to hurt them. So I think that is an opportunity for a Colton Sissons type player to come and make more of an impact. Again, you want to see that impact more on the score sheet, but overall, I think that kind of gives him more of a defined role on this team.
By the way, Michael McCarron, nasty puck to the face, could be out as well. Ryan O'Reilly with a pretty nasty, put on a visor, bro. Come on. Like just I know.
Visor is Ryan O'Reilly's vibe.
I know. I know.
Brandon, I want to go back to you talking about all the career years last year. That's a great point. But at the same time, I feel like I want to make clear here. You're not expecting another career year from all those guys, right? Like you're not counting on that to carry over to this year, right? Because I feel like that would be fool's gold. Like, okay, like, Nyquist had his career year, Sissons had a career year, right? All these guys had their career years, and if you're like, oh, well, if they could just do that again, not you, I'm saying in general, you. Like, if you can just do that again, I think that's a tall task, I think, to ask for.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think the issue is sort of like regression should be expected, to your point, but the drop, like looking at Novak's point total and his production and how they paid him and his contract, it's like this is a 40+ point per year player. Like I want to say he played like 57 games or something like that his first year, and then 71 last year. And like I know the point total kind of stayed about the same, so he's kind of leveling off. But this is a huge drop. Like,
oh yeah, I mean he's on pace for 26 points or something, which is not good enough.
Sissons with 3 points is not Colton Sissons. Again, I go back to what Emma was saying. Kind of, I agree with Emma. I think this is not a Colton Sissons problem. Colton Sissons didn't change who he is in like year 11 in the NHL. Like he is what he is, and he's pretty good player for a lot of reasons. And he's kind of like a 25 to 30 point player, not a 9-point player. Like that's not a Colton Sissons problem, in my opinion. That is sort of a function of the team struggling and the system. So I agree with your point, Gover. No, no one should expect career years, but we've seen what they can do in this system with this coach, and this is a shell of that from a lot of the depth pieces, at least. And so when you add that to the fact that the other guys, the stars, are also way off of their career paces, that's when you start to go, okay, what's going on here? And so it's them trying to figure it out. And the question is, to both of y'all's point, is it too little too late for the Preds to have a meaningful set of hockey games in April and May? And I don't, right now it feels like it's out of reach, but I don't want to be the Grinch. Okay. Emma can be is it Cindy Lou, or what's the girl's name that's like the star
Cindy
of that
Lou who?
Cindy Lou.
Cindy Lou who?
I don't take this the wrong way,
Put my hair
Gover,
up.
don't take this the wrong way, Gover, but with that sweater on, for some reason you look like Max. I don't know why. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, you make sure you go check out Gover's sweater. It's a fantastic sweater. I want to take a quick pause from all the negativity and then the streaking and the positivity, and I just want to. I want to say
my sweater negative.
No. In fact, you're
two narwhals roasting marshmallows on their tusks. I don't think that's negative at all.
It's not. It's in fact not. In fact, it was a great segue into the Christmas conversation I want to have with you guys, because of course we have to do that. Sinkers, Beverages, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. If you want to go get some quick stocking stuffers last minute, they've got great merch, great gear. Sinkers Beverages has fantastic champagne selection, really good bourbon if you need something nice for the family, for the in-laws. If you need to get out of the house after Christmas, make sure you go to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for a great meal over the weekend when the Preds head on the road. But here's my question, because my wife told me yesterday that there's a debate raging on the internet. And she is my chief internet correspondent, because I am not on any video platforms that suck your brain into your phone for hours on end. I'm not on one of those. But she goes, man, there's a big debate going on the internet about presents. And I'm like, what? Presents? What do you mean? Like, do we give them? Do we not give them? And she was talking about, families that you marry into a family that gives presents versus ones that don't give presents, and how if you do give presents, and then you don't, you feel like it's cheap. But if you don't give presents, you're like, no, this is about family spending time together. Where is It's All Your Fault podcast on presents for Christmas? This is a very broad question. Are you guys aware of the debate that's raging on the internet?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm not aware of the debate that's raging on the internet, which I find is a very interesting adjective. Raging on the internet. But I will say that this reminds me of my serving days in restaurants. I served for 10.5 years in restaurants back in another life. And I remember there was this awesome couple that would come in all the time. And I thought I gave them great service, and they didn't tip me like twice in a row. And by the third time I was like, I bet they don't believe in it. Like, because there wasn't like I dropped a soda on their lap, like it was no kind of like crazy, like I was rude. And then they were in a good mood and smiling and having. I gave them, everything was on time. My point is that it's all about intent. So for me, Braden, the long answer to your question is if I'm marrying into a family, thankfully I didn't, but if I'm marrying into a family that, doesn't give presents, then you just have to kind of read the room after a couple times and go, oh, okay, this is just how it is. And it's about intent. It's not they don't love you any less. They just don't give presents.
You give a present to like everybody, and like if you have a family gathering of like 15 people, everybody there gives a present to everyone. Has to buy 14 presents.
I think a card suffices as a present sometimes. So I'll say yes.
I've changed. I grew up in a present family, and then I've become a non-present person. Not for the kids. The kids get presents, but I know it sounds cheesy, but I'm like, no, it's about the time we spend together. And like, I don't, giving a gift should be about like making the other like person feel seen and heard and like doing something nice for them. I'm trying to teach my daughters that. It's not about like, I don't know. It's like, it's just not about giving so much stuff to people. I don't know. Does that make sense, Emma?
Yeah, I think, growing up, I don't have a huge family, so like when we would get together, it like everyone got a gift, but it wasn't like that big of a deal because like there weren't that many of us. But I think as I've gotten older, when I was first kind of like when I was out of college and I was living on my own and doing my own thing, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get Christmas presents for all of my friends, and it's gonna be this whole thing. My friends and I do not give Christmas presents to each other anymore. Like the only the only one
team no present.
I mean my family, we still do. Like I get presents for my parents, they get presents for me, and like I feel like with my friends, the only friend who I like still regularly exchange Christmas gifts with is my friend Megan. She is my best friend since high school, and we don't live in the same place. And so it's like kind of a tradition once a year. We each mail each other a gift. It's our thing. But it's like I don't do that. I know. I don't do that with every one of my friends. Like my friends who live in Nashville and my friends who I see regularly, it's like love you guys. It's like but that's it. And I think like again, I'm big on like I will get them all a present for their birthday. But not Christmas, because I don't know. I feel like it just feels like it gets to a point where it feels forced a little bit. And
that's
you said,
right. That's right.
It's like, okay, do you really need this like small scented candle that I picked up from some random store? Or like would you rather like us have like a Christmas get together or something like that where we spend time together? That's like more how I've kind of evolved into that thinking.
I don't know if this is where Braden was going with this conversation, but I'll just say that is a gift, Emma. That's
that's my point.
Is the gift. So it doesn't have to be physically unwrapped to be a gift or physically given to somebody. It can be a moment. It can be a dinner. It can be a, hey, I'm going to come see you.
Shotgun Willie's barbecue even.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Whatever it is. But also, I just want to say that Emma reminded me that I'm the last person to ask this question to, because I give gifts to people, friends, acquaintances, people I don't know, if my imagination and my thoughtfulness is sparked. Right. So there was just quick story. There was a writer that was coming in to cover the Preds game. I cannot remember just to test into my point. I could not remember what market she was from, but I saw on Twitter the day before that she had met Drew Bledsoe, and it was like a great moment for her childhood and all this stuff. And I was like, I have a Drew Bledsoe Funko Pop that I don't need. So I packaged it up and I left it on her press box seat. Just because I thought it would be funny and a topical thing, nod to whatever her experience she just had. And she thanked me profusely on Twitter. I don't know her. Couldn't even tell you her name right now. But so I'm the last person to ask, because I tend to give gifts whenever it strikes me. As opposed
Emma,
to, it's Christmas. So.
Emma, have you gotten a gift from Gover, Emma?
I have not.
So some girl
for my Funko Pop.
So some person Gover can't remember their name has sparked more inspiration than either of us, because I've never gotten a gift from Gover either.
Wow.
So I've
No,
never
but I
sparked him. I've
think
never sparked him. My daughters are
It's
huge.
coming. I
My
promise you,
my
it'll-
daughters are
It'll hit, and I'll be like, "Oh, Braden," or
My
"Oh,
da-
Emma."
but
my daughters are
that's a
huge
good
Packers
point
fans.
though.
Go over.
That's a good point though. Is like if I think of something or I see something that's like, "Oh my gosh, I have to get that for this person," then I'll do it. But it's not like,
Right.
"Oh crap, I haven't gotten a Christmas
Right.
present for this person. All right, what do I get? Here, have a candle or something." Like it's got to be something that, if I see it or I think of it, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Ooh, they would like that."
No, I think in theory, Gover, you're correct. You just hurt my feelings that I've never sparked inspiration ever. But it's fine. It's fine. I've only known you for like 10 years. So here's the thing. My wife comes from a large family where she has 4 brothers and sisters, and like we're all married now. And so like the 8 of us would get together, and it was always Secret Santa, right? Like it's one gift. Each person gets one gift for one person, and then you're all trying to guess. And so it becomes an experience, and it's fun. And you don't have to buy like 7 gifts for a bunch of people. That it's just it's a lot to undertake sometimes if you're trying to give a gift to every single person. And now guess what happened this year? This is sort of where I'm assuming this is what inspired her busting into the office on Monday and being like, "Have you seen the debate raging on the internet?" I said, "That's what the internet's
Raging
for."
on the internet.
Nothing else happens on the internet, by the way. It's just raging. And so I said, what we're doing this year, and this was not me deciding any of this, it was her and her siblings deciding that everyone's going to buy themselves a gift, and they have to stand up in front of the group and explain it themselves. Which I think is pretty funny because we're all going to get something we like.
Or dangerous. So there's
this is what I bought myself. I bought myself these to block out the noise of my children during the holiday break.
I mean, yeah, you're all gonna get something you like, but it takes a little bit of the fun out of it. There's no element of surprise to it.
Now, to be fair, I have 2 nephews and a niece. I have 2 kids, and so everyone's going all out for the kids. Like that's different. That's a different ballpark. We're all adults, and frankly, my brothers-in-law, they don't want me buying a bunch of plastic crap for their kids that they're just going to end up throwing away anyway. Like they don't want me to do that. Anyway, all right. I want to ask. Now let's talk about Justin Barron.
Speaking
What
of
a
gifts,
segue.
Professional, everybody. Sinkers, Beverages, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Emma, just show up with a couple bottles of champagne with your friends, and I'm sure they'd appreciate just hanging out with you and spending time with you with some bubbles. So there you go. All right. I do want to ask you about Justin Barron because I think that was a pretty big move by the team, and played 13 minutes on Monday night. Curious what you guys thought about what you saw. I thought, showed the things in the scouting report that I think we saw, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was actually very impressed with him in what we saw on Monday. He was very visible on both ends of the ice, even, I thought. I think he finished with 3 hits, maybe. I mean, like you could see like he had the big body, he's physical, and he looked, he didn't look lost out there. He didn't look like he was floundering. I mean, he definitely looked like he was part of the play, and he again really good at creating space on the offensive zone. He's good at creating space for guys to get to the net, but then in the defensive zone, really good at defending the net. And I think that this was a good move. There was a lot of talk about the Predators and, oh my gosh, what is Barry Trotz doing there? He's already selling, and this team is going nowhere. How does he think that he's going to be a buyer when they're in last place? And it has become very apparent to me that a lot of the people who are raging on the internet do not understand what buyer means, or they don't understand that it can mean more than one thing. When people hear buyer, I think they automatically go to the trade deadline definition of buyer, which is like, oh, we're like one piece away. We just need this one guy to get us, through this lengthy playoff run that we're making right now. And so when Barry Trotz came out after the Carrier-Barron trade, he said, yeah, I'm looking to buy. And people are like, what the hell? What are you talking about? Like, how are you going to buy? You're in last place. And what he means, though, is that he is buying for the long term. Like, Justin Barron is a guy who is not, he becomes an RFA after 2026. So it's like he He's younger than Carrier. He's cheaper. He comes with more team control. This is a guy who will not only impact the team now, but he will be, he has the importance or the potential to impact this team moving forward. And like Carrier, again, it's not saying that like, oh, Carrier was the problem, we got to ship him out of here. No, it's just like he became more expendable because of the emergence of guys like Nick Blankenberg and Adam Wilsby and Mark Del Gaizo. Like you're seeing, and Carrier obviously has this trade value because we saw that at the deadline last year. His name was out there all the time. So it was like, clearly he's a tradable asset. He has value on the market. This now gives Nashville a couple of things. Number one, like I said, they get younger, cheaper, more control in Barron. They also get bigger and that was bigger, which was important to Barry Trotz. But then also it gives them more flexibility with the cap. And I think that can either be now, like if they want to try to make a move in season, or it can come in handy during the off season, during next free agency, like giving them that flexibility. It opens up a lot of possibilities for them and a lot of things where, again, I think as soon as Barry said, like, yeah, I'm trying to buy, I was like, oh, Barry. I was like, now I'm going to have to go around and put out these raging internet fires by people saying, like, how are you going to buy? And
can't do it. It's impossible.
I think I know. He's buying for the long term because, again, and I've said this before, this was not a make or break season for Nashville. All of these guys are signed beyond this year. It's not, I mean, realistically speaking, I am not trying to defend the awful start that they had. I'm not saying that, yes, this is where they should be right now in the bottom of the league. I'm not saying that. But this was not the year that I was like, all right, Stanley Cup or bust, let's go. It's not. I mean, like, it's really, you got to think of it in a, Braden, stop looking at me like that. You got to think about it.
It's okay to acknowledge that the expectations were high, and rightly so. I'm just saying.
They were high. They were high. And I will say 1000%, they did not live up to the expectations early. And I don't think that this start was acceptable. I think it would have been acceptable for maybe a month, but not 2 months. Yeah. And I think, all of these things can be true, but the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, they're not going to win a Stanley Cup this year. Well, it was all for nothing. It's like, no, because if you remember back July 1st, when Barry made all these moves, a lot of, what we were saying about it is like, okay, this is actually really impressive because he did all of this without leveraging any of the team's future. So he really just he accelerated the timeline, I think, for this competitive window and like kind of busted open now. But you have to think of these guys, the Stamkoses and the Marchessauts and the Sheas, as more of a, well, more so Stamkos and Marchessault, as more of a like a stopgap, because the last thing you want to do is bring up these young players before they're ready, because that's detrimental to them, it's detrimental to the team. So I think that, looking at all of this, again, people like to get tunnel vision and look at things in a vacuum, like, why would you trade Alex Carrier? You just signed him to a 3-year extension. It's like, well, he is expendable and he has a lot of value on the market. And that's not saying he was a bad player, not saying that he was, the problem with this team, but it's like this addresses issues that Barry has always said that he plans to address. He wants to get younger. He wants to get bigger on the back end. And it's like, we should not be surprised that this move happened. And I don't think it was making a move for the sake of making a move. I just think that this addresses a bunch of different things that Barry's trying to do. He's getting younger, he's getting bigger, he's getting cheaper, he's getting that cap flexibility, because that was one of the big things after July 1st. It was like, well, crap, he just spent all of their money. Like, they have no cap space left. And that is, starting to help alleviate that. So I think that this was a good move. And I don't think it's a sign. People, it's wild to me how even, and not just with Predators fans, even like the national media were starting, like the the narrative around Barry Trotz was like, oh my God, what is he doing? He's panicking. What is he doing? I'm like, no, this seems to me, it seems very calculated. It's not like, all right, let's sell off everyone. It was just like, no, this trade made a lot of sense for this team.
I agree. I think it makes sense. Also, some of that money he spent was on Carrier, just to point out.
Well,
point
and
out.
now it's off the books.
How about Wedgwood, Askarov, Glass, Tomasino, Carrier, Fabro? This is a different team already, just in the last 3 months. It's wild. Gover, your thoughts on Barron?
Well, I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit and just ask a question that Justin Barron and the Carrier trade made me think about, which is, okay, so let's say, right, because what Emma just said, right, they traded Carrier, they got some cap relief, they got younger, all these things. The cap relief is what I want to focus on. So if they got cap relief, because maybe he's playing chess, right, and then in January or February, something's going to come open that isn't expected.
Mitch Marner?
Trade.
Are you going to talk about Mitch Marner?
No. But that's an astute point that I should have thought of. No, but if something's going to come open and he's going to, make a big swing. Okay, right, let's, for sake of argument, player X,
Patrick Laine,
fine. Patrick Laine, fine. But I'm saying, so if that's the case, my point though of saying all this is that we've seen how long it takes Stamkos, Marchessault, Shea to adjust to this system. How effective do we think it's going to be when they bring in a guy at the deadline for the home stretch and maybe the playoff run? Now, he did say, admittedly, don't be surprised if I go after a guy with term. He did say that. So we're not necessarily talking about a rental here. But my point, though, is that it gives me cause for concern in the sense that if you don't get him early enough, is he going to also slump for 2 months, 2.5 months before he hits his stride, whoever this player X is? And then is it even worth it? So I guess that's my question to you guys. Are you concerned about that at all? Has that notion even hit you at all?
I think that's a valid question and a valid concern, but I think that it doesn't, if you're looking at this is not the year, 2024-25 is not the year for them to win the Stanley Cup, that really doesn't matter. I think that, if you're getting a guy with term. Now, if it's a rental and it takes him 2 months to hit his stride and then the season's over and he's gone, yes, that would be a concern, because why are you making that move? I think for a guy who has term, and again, this was something, to your point, Gover, that I stressed about this, early on in the season, about guys, even last year's team took half a season to adjust to this system. And so totally understand that. And I agree with it. But if it's a player with term, I am not really concerned about that right now, because if you're punting on this season, not saying punting like, oh, we give up, we're going to sell, all this stuff. Like, I'm just saying, you acknowledge this is not our year to win a Stanley Cup, which I don't think is egregious to say. I think you just look at it in terms of like 3 to 5 year chunks of time with this team. And it's like, if you have a guy who has term, you bring him in, even if this is not his best year, if he takes 2 months or whatever to adjust, I am less concerned about that if he's a guy who's going to be with the team beyond this season.
Fair enough.
Yeah. A rental would be like, to me, if I'm Barry Trotz, it's like flying to New York City and getting a rental car and just having it sit there in the garage and paying for it. Like, that's what a rental would be right now. And I think that's real dumb, just in person, just my personal opinion. I agree with Emma. If you're going to go get, like, again, we talked about Cousins on the show last week. Like, if you're going to go get a Cousins and he's part of your plan for like 6 years, 2 months doesn't matter. It's totally irrelevant. You want the player long term. So, I don't know. I think if there's a move that they make where somebody has, 4 months left on the contract, unless you are taking it to gain assets because of salary or some other element of strategy, I think it's a fireable offense to go get a rental player when you are one win out of. You still have the fewest wins in the NHL, guys. Like, they're not last place at time of taping. They are not. But they still have the fewest wins in the NHL. They're 4-1-1 in their last 6. They have to do that every 6 games the rest of the year to get into the playoffs for a rental to actually matter. And so
I was thinking of the Ryan Johansson timing, right? When they traded Johansson and when they traded for Johansson, Seth Jones, that was January 4th or 5th or something around that time, right? If they did that now, then I think it would make a lot of sense, because then you have a ramp up and then he can kind of hopefully jump on a moving train. And then if he struggles maybe a little bit, he gets helped by the other players. Maybe they figured it out to the point where they can explain. Maybe it's something that clicks in a player's head, whatever the case is. Yeah. But I just think waiting until February 28th or whatever is going to be a big problem. If, again, unless you guys are right, he's bringing in a Cousins or he's bringing in somebody who's going to, be here long term, or at least more than a year, I guess is what I'm saying.
I mean, I think that's why you're getting the news and the rumors about those types of players, right? Like,
sure, right.
So, all right, you guys, Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus for the rest of us, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. I hope you're having a great one. I do want one quick note here, because again, they've been good. The last they are just a few games removed from an 8-game losing streak, so we have to sort of keep everything in perspective. But they have played much better on offense in particular. I thought the defense was really, really good against Los Angeles for the first 2 periods. Los Angeles was a team that was playing very, very well. I took my youngest, got to go to her first Predators game on Saturday. Thank you for the 12:30 start time and for let's call them reduced prices on tickets. But it was a blast. We sat up in cell block, and shout out to cell block for just keeping people engaged the entire game. The kids really gravitated towards that. I thought it was great. They really sort of discombobulated the Kings. I know we haven't talked about the other games since our last episode, but like the Kings were so disoriented for 2 games. I talked to somebody in the organization during intermission, and I was like, what is going on? And this is what I want to leave people with, because I want you guys to, I'm going to be the Grinch for a second, and then you guys can finish the show with positivity. But this person looked at me and goes, we're the trap game now for people. And I was like, look, you got to take them where you can get them when you're in last place. And if teams overlook this team, and that's a way you can start collecting points, then you got to take the points how you can get them. But they played really well on defense, I thought, against the Rangers. Really, an interesting game against Pittsburgh. And then I thought really totally the Kings didn't look like the Kings for 2 periods. Now, they played very well in the 3rd period, but for 2 periods, they did not look like themselves. And credit to the Predators for showing up. If another team's not going to show up, you got to take advantage, even if it's kind of insulting to be called a trap game for people. You got to take your 2 points when you can get them. So there's my last Grinchy moments. Go to Sinkers Beverages and to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, and I'll let you guys finish it on a high note. So what's your message heading into Christmas here?
Well, my message is that this team appears, I'm going to hold off until probably January to make sure that I solidify this statement, but it appears as if they've turned it around. I still believe they can make the playoffs. Will they? I'm not prepared to say that, but I think they can. Again, they're 11 points out right now, which seems like a lot, but at the same time, a 3-game slide by somebody else, and all of a sudden you string a couple wins together. Now now it's totally possible. So, but here's the problem, and I guess I would have a Grinchy moment too, because I stumbled upon this. It was not the purpose, right? I was trying to be shiny, but I think for years, except for maybe the President's Trophy years, right, where they were kind of in contention for a couple of years there, challenging for the division. This team franchise has had such a problem, whether it be injuries or whatever the case is, of fighting tooth and nail till the end. There's no real kind of relief. Like, hey, it's like we're gonna not rest a guy. Like that doesn't really happen in hockey very often. But we're gonna, it's okay. We're gonna start our backup goaltender, give UC some time off or whatever the case is, because we got that second spot solid. Whatever it is, okay. It's always seems to be tooth and nail. Every game matters. Every point matters. At least get a point in March. At least, and then all of a sudden, on the last game of the year, they're either in the playoffs or they just got bounced. And unfortunately, for this kind of older roster, which we've kind of alluded to, they're going to be doing that again. If they do, even if they do turn it around, they're not going to all of a sudden be comfortably in 3rd place in the Central. They're going to be fighting for a wild card spot. And I think that is not going to be good for UC Saros' workload, which Emma is very much on record for, on our show at least, for like he plays too much. So, Annunen, you've gotten some great starts from. That's awesome. So can you start believing in him and unload Saros' workload a little bit? My point of saying all this is that it's just unfortunate that yes, you'll take a playoff run any time you can get it, for sure. But it's just unfortunate that it took them this long to figure it out, because at the end of the day, if they do come back and they do make the playoffs, it's going to take all 82 games again to scratch and claw and get everything. They're not going to have any time to rest injured players or guys who have nagging injuries. And it's just unfortunate.
Gonna expend a lot of energy. Yep.
Well, dang. I guess, how did I become the positive one on the show? I don't like this. This is
You're on
off
Eastern
brand
time,
for me. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm on East Coast time. I'm a different person. I think I mean, I will agree. I think this team has turned it around. I think that everything that we were saying at the beginning of the season is still true about them needing time to adjust, and there was going to be growing pains. But admittedly, the time to adjust was longer than any of us thought it would be. We are now starting to see them get there, which is good. And I think it's good because, like Gover said, I'm not prepared to say, guys, we're coming back. We're just surging all the way into the playoffs. I'm not ready to say that. But
raging is the word of the day.
Raging, yes.
Raging.
You can rage on the ice too. All right.
I'm not here to rage. I am here to say I think that they can. I'm not ready to say, yes, they're going to the playoffs, but I'm also not ready to say the season's a wash. Like, it's done. It's over. They're not making the playoffs. I still think, it depends, unfortunately, where we are. And this, I guess, will be my negativity. And this is kind of what Gover said, is that they are no longer in control of their own destiny at this point. And so they now have to, they can get to the playoffs, but it's not just about them winning. It's going to be about other teams losing, or maybe, you catch a break here and there, and that's the situation you're in. So it's not going to be easy, but it's definitely possible. And we've seen this team, again, I go back to last year. It took them more than half a season to figure it out. And so now I think, if they can keep this going, this is a positive sign, and it makes me feel better about, like, the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe not this year, but the next 2 to 3.
Well, we'll find out in the next 2 to 3 weeks about this season, because St. Louis, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, all on the road. This team has not been good on the road, and those are all good hockey teams mostly. So we shall see. Gover, why don't you send us off here on our merry holiday way? Always a pleasure to see you guys, and Merry Christmas, and Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue.
Braden, how can they follow you?
They can follow me at Braden Gall on Blueski. Skeeting up a storm over there. Come on over. Technically, I'm still on Twitter, but basically just raging on the internet at Braden Gall.
All right, Emma, where can they find you raging on the internet?
You can find me raging on Twitter still. I have not made it over to Blue Sky, but you can find me at Emma_Lingan.
You can follow me at It's Gover Time. And of course, you can follow the It's All Your Fault podcast at IAYF podcast on Twitter for now. Hopefully, we'll make that migration to Blue Sky shortly. I'm Jeremy Gover. He's Braden Gall, Emma Lingan. Thank you so much for joining us. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. We hope it is the best time of family, personal health, growth, whatever it needs to be. Happy holidays to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.